Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the 173rd session of the online Optom Learning Series, OOLS. And for today's session, we have with us Dr. Frank Eperjesi. Dr. Frank has over 3 decades of experience working in an independent practice, corporate practice, as an academician in academia, working as a specialist optometrist in the areas of low vision as well as in learning disability. Currently, he is working in a domiciliary practice, helping people who are too unwell to leave their homes to see better. Most of his work is around that particular aspect. He has written several books, the recent 2 books being on the art of binocular vision practice and also the art of clinical practice in optometry. And with that experience of over 3 decades, currently he is the co-founder of iTools online professional development platform, where he shares his expertise and knowledge. Dr. Frank has been with us since our initial days. We are now 2 years old, but he has done a couple of sessions with us, always came back and shared his thoughts and ideas. And today he's going to take us through his experience on what are these techniques we can apply without using any high-tech devices to help prosper our practice. So welcome, sir, again onto our platform. And let me just, leave the screen time to you now.
Thank you very much, FB. It's always a pleasure to work with you and your team. And it's always a privilege for me to share things that I've learned over the years. My goal in what I do with my work is obviously to help patients see better, but it's also to help clinicians help their patients see better. So I noticed over the last sort of couple of years or so that there were many presentations, many lectures, many articles about artificial intelligence to do with eyes and retinal implants and sophisticated equipment. And that's great, it's good that we're pushing forward, but we must never forget the basic in practice work that we do. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I've got 5 no tech, no cost ways. Well, there is a little bit of a cost, not a financial cost to what I'll be talking about, but there'll be a cost in terms of time and effort. I've worked in my own practice, had my own practice for 10 years. I'm not one of these people that sit in a university and don't know what it's like in the real world. I've worked in practice, I've run my own practice, I've worked in many other people's practice, and I'm working in practice now, as well as doing domiciliary work. So I'm a frontline, we call it in the UK, coalface practitioner. I have qualifications in binocular vision, in business, and in education, as well as optometry. So these are the 5 topics that I'll be talking about, and I've listed them there. And I noticed that there's a whole range of different people who were attending today, and I should have said good afternoon or good evening, and thank you for joining. I know that there are, across the world, there are some areas where there is some fasting going on. So if you're fasting, then keep going. But thanks for joining. So these are the 5 areas I'm going to cover, and I know there are academicians listening, and there's students, and there's people in retail practice and people in hospital. But I'm confident that there'll be something for you, all of you, to gain from this presentation, because the vast majority of you will be working with other people, and the majority of you will be making recommendations to patients about their eye care, and that's what I've brought together here. A combination of what I've learned myself in practice and what other people have shared with me in practice. It's often called the nuts and bolts. It's the foundation. And, I've put there nuts and bolts versus technology. Now, here's a sentence that you will never hear a patient say. I don't think so anyway. I love going to my eye care practice. The staff are terrible, but there's so much brilliant equipment. I love going back there, and I share that with all of my friends and all of my relatives and encourage them to go there. You will never hear anyone say that. I'm going to be talking about the culture in the practice, and I think to sum it all up, I'll be talking about patient and customer service and how that to me tops everything. Because if you don't have good patient customer service, you can have all the tech in the world, but you won't be using it on anyone because the patients will go somewhere else if your staff don't know how to treat them and you've got poor customer service. I'll just give you a brief example. Most Thursdays I go out for lunch with a friend, and I walk past about 5 restaurants to get to the restaurant that I like. It's the furthest away. It's not the cheapest. I've tried all the other restaurants, but the customer service in the one that I go to is the best. And that's why I go back. And that's why every Thursday I spend 20 or 30 pounds in there on a very nice lunch with a friend. And I ignore the other ones because the customer service in the other ones was poor. This is the power of customer service. In order to be able to buy the tech and use the tech, you need to have people come to your practice, and you need to have people come to your practice repeatedly, coming back with their business. So that's what I'm talking about, really. Tech is great. We can do a good job with tech, but we need to have the basic staff behavior, and how to talk and how to deal with people. So I think that's sort of the nuts and bolts. So the first one is double tasking. So, people often say, or some people say, that women can double task and men can't. Well, the news is that no one can double task effectively. So this is trying to do 2 things at once. So you're trying to do a history and symptoms, for example, in the practice, and at the same time, you're tidying up the lenses from the previous patient, or you're setting up the tonometer, or you're doing something, you're getting your equipment ready while you're doing the history and symptoms. Now, and again, if you're a student, then typically some students will be trying to study, and at the same time they're checking their emails and texting and looking at TikTok, and that just simply does not work. Neither of the tasks you're trying to do at the same time are done very effectively. No one can do that. In practice, if you're not paying full attention to the patient, you can miss some key clinical information. Happened to me just on Friday when I wasn't listening properly because I got distracted by I was making some notes on a tablet and something didn't work, and I missed the fact that the patient is troubled with glare when they're outside in the sun. Luckily, there was a colleague that was sat with me and pointed that out to me, but I got distracted because I wasn't paying full attention. So not only do you might miss some key clinical information, it's rude. It's rude not to pay full attention. What I try to do is look at the patient in the face, ask them the questions. When they've delivered the response, then I make a note. But I shouldn't be listening and note taking at the same time. And some people will consider it rude, and others will think that I'm not paying attention, and that will drain their confidence in me. Do one task at a time. When you're finished, move on to the next task. Don't try multi or double task. It simply does not work. It tires you out, and neither of the things you're trying to do are done very well. Number 2, again, I've been into doctors' practices that are to have some healthcare problem dealt with, and they're a total shambles. There are patients' records everywhere, including the floor. There's half-eaten sandwich in the corner. There's a textbook that's open over there. What a mess. And again, that does not instill any professional confidence in that health practitioner. You want people to realize that you're a professional when you're working in practice, or if you're preparing to work in practice, or if you're an academic. It applies to academics as well. I was an academic for years, and the number of offices I went to have colleagues that I had to kick some student exam papers out of the way in order to be able to get into the room because they were all on the floor. And again, it just does not give a professional It does not give a professional appearance. And when someone doesn't appear professional, then the person on the receiving end starts to think, well, are they a professional? Do they know what they're doing? What a mess. So again, a disorganized room could be because there's a disorganized mind. And I don't know about you, but I don't want someone with a disorganized mind looking at my eyes or looking at my body. I want someone with a fixed, professional, organized mind looking at my eyes and looking at my body. Keep things tidy, put things away, tidy up your lenses before the patient comes into the room, put your equipment away, don't have a half-eaten sandwich or your phone nearby that will distract you. Keep it nice and tidy and clean, and make sure that the important equipment, your ophthalmoscope, your retinoscope, your cross sills, make sure that they are within easy reach. So you don't have to keep, if you're looking for things under a mountain of notes, loads of patient notes or paperwork or something, it just doesn't look good. It takes time, it slows you down, it makes you look very unprofessional. And again, the patient is thinking, does this person know what they're doing? And once the doubt starts to get in there into the person's mind, then they'll be thinking, do I really want to get my glasses from this practice? Don't look very organized. This person is all over the place. What a mess it is in here. Look at the dust. And do I want to get my glasses from here? Do I ever want to come back to this practice? I'm not going to recommend it to my friends because it would be an embarrassment if they came in on my recommendation. So just these things, simple things, which are easy to do. There's no tech, just a bit of time. I used to work in a practice with a colleague that my first job in the practice, when I went in to do my session, was to take the dust off the table and off the slit lamp and off other equipment, because it wasn't a room that was used a lot, and it was just dusty and dirty, and it was an embarrassment. And I used to go along half an hour before my clinic started to tidy the room and dust the dust off the equipment. Needless to say, I didn't stay there very long. So keep things neat, keep things tidy, keep things that you need at hand. Look professional, be professional, act professional. People will listen to what you've got to say in terms of your recommendations. They will buy glasses from your practice. They will come back and they will tell their friends and relatives to come and see you as well. Again, there's this thing called decision fatigue. We make lots of decisions during a day. Which is the best lens? Which is the best prescription? Which is the best lens? Is there an eye disease? Is there no eye disease? Do I need to refer? When do they need to come back? Do I need to do further tests? So there's a lot of stimuli in your brain, and this is tiring. This is why it's important to have lunch breaks and other breaks. But if we've got a lot of mess in the room, then that adds to the decision fatigue that we will get anyway. And if you're trying to find things that you can't find, again, that will wear you down, and that will add to the decision fatigue. And to me, and maybe this is me, I don't know. I know it's not me because I've spoken to other people. Straight lines make me feel calm and focused. Empty spaces make me feel calm and focused. Clutter makes me feel stressed and anxious and unfocused. A cluttered desk could mean, and in the patient's eyes probably does mean, a cluttered mind. An uncluttered desk means an uncluttered mind. So again, you don't need to spend any money on this. You just need to spend a bit of time in arranging things and keeping them arranged and keeping things tidy. This is a big one for me, this next one. Again, I've worked in practices where, I haven't stayed there very long because there was just such a negative mindset amongst the staff that they were always, talking badly about the member of staff that wasn't in the room. They talked badly about the boss and how they were badly treated. It was just just sucked out all the life from me. All the positivity was sucked out because the constant complaining. And I did my best to stay in the consulting room because I didn't want to hear all that gossip and all that negativity. So, if it's your practice, you need to make sure your staff do not engage in these sorts of activities. Don't say anything negative about other practices, about other practitioners, about the sales reps. I know sales reps can be, the people that come and sell you frames and contact lenses and things. I know they can be a little bit annoying when they just arrive without prior appointments and you have to sort of fit them in. But, give them a cup of tea, it's important that the practice develops positivity, that everyone is talking about you because you're friendly and you're positive and smiley and happy. And that's important for that culture to be developed. Have a team meeting if this is not how your practice is, and explain the importance of positivity, not being negative and no gossiping. Because and I know this is true, that when people gossip to me about other people, I know that when they're not with me, they're with other people, they're gossiping about me. And that again makes me feel bad. It affects morale, brings everyone down, and that does not lead to good customer service. One of my mantras is, and if I can't think of anything good to say, then I won't say anything. And if there are staff who are gossiping, I never engage in the gossip. I usually just move away and go to a different place in the practice. If it's a practice where I don't have any authority. And if you're a student and you're thinking, well, I don't have any authority. Yes, but you can refuse to engage in the gossiping. You can refuse to be negative about other practitioners in competitive practices. You can refuse to be negative about your boss. And all of this will lead in the practice I work in at the moment is like, to me, it's the gold standard practice. It doesn't have much tech. It just has a Humphrey visual field analyzer, nice selection of frames, but the staff is so welcoming and so friendly that when I go there and see patients, it's quite common for me to see people who have been going to that same practice for their eye care for 30 to 40 years. And the notes are, this thick, because the staff are so friendly. And it's just a joy to work there. And when they ask me to go and do a session to cover, I'm very happy because I know I'm going to have a delightful day and work with delightful, friendly, happy people. Now, if you come to an agreement with your staff to have this culture and they breach the agreement, then it's important for you to discuss that with them. And if they continue to breach the agreement and they continue to take part in this negative activity, then you really need to think about moving them away out of your practice and bringing somebody else in. And if you're hiring, and that's not easy to do, I know. And if you're hiring new people, maybe in their contract, just say we're going to have a 3-month probation period, so you can get a sense of whether they adapt or take on board your culture. And if they do, then great. Then maybe extend things to 6 months just to make sure. And if they're still part of the good team and they're adhering to the agreement, then you may want to give them a full-time job. And if they fall foul of your agreement and they are negative and they do gossip, then you can let them go quite easily. It's much more difficult with staff who have been there for a while. So I've spoken about the staff and double tasking and keeping things tidy and not gossiping, and those things, everyone in the practice can buy into that. What I'm going to talk about now is this is mainly for people involved in dispensing and the people involved in prescribing the prescription. So this is dealing with a non-tolerance. So this is when a person has had glasses from you and there's some issue and they've come back to say that the glasses don't meet their expectations in some way. And usually it's a visual thing in my experience. Usually people say that they have an eye ache or a headache, or they can't see so well, or they can't read well, or they can't see well enough to drive. Usually for the non-tolerance element of things, usually it's to do with not seeing so well. Now, I look on that as this person has given me another chance to sort out their glasses. So I've got a second chance. I probably won't get a third chance, but at least they've given me a second chance. And when a person comes in and they're not getting on with glasses that they've had from your practice, it's important to acknowledge that. I'm sorry you're not getting on with your new glasses. It was my intention that you could see to drive, you could see to read, or the prescriber's intention. And I'll just contrast that with, again, bringing in a story about my mother who's hard of hearing. She's had some hearing aids fitted, and she's not been happy with them. So she's been going back to the hearing practice where she got them from. And eventually they sorted things out. And then she was asked to go back for an aftercare, and she was happy with her hearing aid now. And when she went into the practice, the hearing aid practitioner said, "Oh, what's your problem now?" Now, she didn't have a problem. She'd gone back because it was she'd been called back for an aftercare. All her problems had been solved. But what a way to greet a practitioner. I think she'd spent £3,000 on the hearing aids. What a way to greet a patient. What a way for the practitioner to greet the patient. What's your problem now? How awful. My advice to her was to find another hearing practice based on that terrible customer service. So when a person comes back with a non-tolerance or with a problem, it's important to acknowledge that they have a problem. It's important to be positive and welcoming, and then to go through sort of a non-tolerance regime to find what the problem is. And they usually fall into two areas: that there's some sort of dispensing issue, in that the frame doesn't fit well. Maybe it's a bifocal and the fitting height is too low and the pads need adjusting to push the frame up. Maybe it's a varifocal and the heights aren't right. Maybe the person has had second thoughts about the way they look in the frame. Maybe there was just some misunderstanding and the patient wanted varifocals and somehow they've ended up with single vision reading glasses. So these sorts of things can be found out or determined by, I'll call them like the front staff. So the staff who are outside the consulting room, whether that's a retail assistant or whether that's a dispensing optician. These sorts of problems. Maybe it's just a fitting thing and they keep sliding down so the person can't see. These sorts of problems can be dealt with by dispensing people and retail people. When it comes to, let's say that's all gone through, and I strongly suggest that it's the dispensing side that's looked at first rather than jumping straight to the prescription side. But if everything has been looked at with the fit and the fitting heights and the person is happy with how they look in the frame, then that's the time to look at the prescription, to have a check at the prescription. And, I've spoken to practitioners who really blame the patient at this point. Whether they do that in practice, I don't know. But they certainly, when I'm discussing these cases, it's the patient's fault. Because when I was doing the cross-sill, they couldn't make their mind up. So I ended up choosing the wrong lens. But it's never the patient's fault. The cross-sill test for determining, the Jackson cross-sill test for determining the amount of astigmatism and the axis of the astigmatism, it's up to the practitioner, the prescriber, to make sure they've checked and double checked and cross checked again to make sure that the response from the patient is as accurate as it can be. It's a difficult test to do. Is the circles better with one or two? It's a hard test, and that's the part of the test when, in my experience, some patients get a little bit anxious because they're worried about making the wrong choice and ending up with the wrong glasses. So we've gone through all the dispensing issues, and there isn't a dispensing issue. So now we're in the consulting room with the prescriber, and we're looking to see whether the prescription can be made to be more accurate. And I found a really nice research paper on this, where the researchers had looked at almost 3,100 eye examinations, out of which only 62 resulted in, and this is taken from practices, community practices. And there were some interesting things that came out of here. So the average non-tolerance was 1.88%. So if you're seeing 100 people, out of those, just less than 2 would have a non-tolerance, according to these figures. For some of the practitioners, it was slightly over 3 out of 100. What I found fascinating was that a lot of the non-tolerances, over 88%, were from presbyopes. And that little table I've done there. So the most common reasons for non-tolerance were so mainly prescription related in this study, some dispensing related, eye disease related, just simply writing in the wrong prescription, maybe missing a binocular vision problem. But remember, the patient has given you another chance. They haven't come in and demanded their money back, which is good. They've been inconvenienced, they've come back, and they've given you another chance to get it right. Again, the prescription-related errors, it was the spherical element that were accounted for most of the inaccuracies. And I just want to move this box out of the way. That's it. So when the prescription was checked, the second prescription, the final prescription, was within 1 diopter of the not tolerated prescription. So either a little bit more minus or a little bit more plus. But interestingly, nearly 85% were within plus or minus 0.050 of the so the one that worked, the prescription that worked, was very close to the prescription that was not being tolerated. So this again reminds me how small changes in prescription can have quite a marked effect on visual function. So in this case, we're going from not being able to tolerate lenses to being able to tolerate them with just small changes in the prescription. And I bear this in mind whenever I'm working with patients and they've had a small change in their prescription. I bear it in mind whether I'm going to recommend glasses for them or not. And again, the other thing I bear in mind is, even if my new prescription is just a little bit different from their previous one, this is the optimum prescription that I found. Every other lens was rejected by the patient in the spherical comparison part of the refraction and also the cross sill. Everything else was rejected. So this prescription that I found with just a small change is the optimum prescription. And who am I to say, oh, it's a small change, I'm not going to bother? Who am I to say that when it's the optimum prescription and they've rejected every other lens? If I leave them with their old glasses, then they're not wearing the optimum prescription. And it's my job to make sure that patients have the optimum prescription. Of course, I try and make sure that they do get some visual benefit. So, this is your old prescription. Now here's the new prescription. Can you see it's a bit sharper, a bit darker? And if they say yes, then I'm more confident to go ahead. And if they say no, it looks the same, then I'm sort of less confident to go ahead. But bearing in mind, small prescriptions can not only have an effect on non-tolls, they can also have an effect on, or something to bear in mind when you're recommending new glasses with small changes in prescription. But that was a slight digression, but never mind. Okay, so moving on to the next one. Yeah, so, acknowledge the problem. I think I've mentioned this already. I'm sorry you haven't got on with your glasses and you've had to come back. That was not my intention. This is what we're going to do to sort it out. My colleague here is going to look at the lenses and the frame fitting to make sure that's okay. And if that is okay, then I'm going to look at the prescription again. So I've just put a little list to go through the centers, the fitting. I've mentioned a few of those things. What isn't okay is to say, I don't know, I can't find anything wrong. You just have to get on with them. That's not acceptable. Because if you go through this process step by step, you will find something that isn't quite right. To send the patient away with a shrug of the shoulders, say, well, we've looked at these things and we can't find anything wrong, so off you go. Chances are that there's, something's causing their problem. They got on with their old glasses and they're not really getting on with the new ones. So it's important to do your best and to find whatever is causing that issue, and then tell the person, I understand what you're telling me. This is what we're going to do. This is what we found. This is how we're going to solve this. One of the things you need to look out for, and because I'm involved in a lot of legal cases where practitioners have missed things, or the patient alleges that something has been missed, an eye disease has been missed, I get asked to provide an expert opinion, and sometimes it can be hard working with people to detect their eye problems, but sometimes things get missed when they shouldn't get missed. So when a person comes back with a non-tolerance, even if they had their full eye exam 2 weeks ago, and even if that eye exam was done by me, I'm still going to look at their eye health. And by that, I mean their optic nerve and their macula and their retina. Because the problem may be something to do with a disease, the process that I missed 2 weeks ago, or maybe has got a little bit worse in that 2-week period or 3-week period since they've been waiting to have their glasses. And I do this even when I've seen the patient before, but I definitely do it if somebody else saw the patient before. I don't trust anyone else's ophthalmoscopy as much as I trust mine, and I don't even trust mine 100%. I'm bearing in mind this non-tolerance may not be due to a lens thing or a frame thing. It may be due to a disease thing that I've missed or has got slightly worse. And one of the things that I missed as a practitioner a few years ago was when a patient was complaining of not being able to read with his varifocals. I increased his ad, as you do, and he could see N5, recommended some new varifocals. He came back and said, I still can't read very well with these varifocals. So I had another look at the prescription, found it was the same as the first one. So I asked the more experienced practitioner what to do. And he said, have you done visual fields? This was a few years ago when visual field testing wasn't that common. Have you done visual fields on this patient, Frank? Well, no, I haven't. Well, book him in. I'll see him next week. This was the more experienced person. And I'll do visual fields on him and we'll see what's what. So anyway, when I went back and the visual fields had been done, the patient had a bitemporal hemianopia, which accounted for his reading problems. And I hadn't done enough. His issue wasn't it was blurry. His issue was tracking from one line of text to the next line of text because he had this bitemporal hemianopia visual field defect. He sort of lost the beginning of the next line. That was his issue. So he was referred, and he had, probably not too surprisingly to you, a pituitary gland tumour, which I totally missed. Thank heavens for my more experienced, wiser colleague. I learnt a lot in those moments. And the patient came back and told us how grateful he was for being referred, and for his because his pituitary gland tumor was going to be treated. So again, that was a non-toll. That was a disease-related non-toll that, with the help of my colleague, we managed to spot. So now part of my sort of strategy for dealing with non-tolls is, if they haven't already had a visual fields test done, is to make sure that they have one. Okay, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this, because this is part, in my experience, this is part of the practice culture. It's important for these next few slides are important for two reasons. Firstly, it's important because you want to make sure that your patient has all his or her visual needs met. So you need to explore what their visual needs are, and you need to make sure they're met. And by meeting the patient's visual needs, you will then ensure that your practice remains prosperous and has enough income to pay everyone's salary, pay the lease, pay for new frames, pay for the heating, pay for the lighting, pay for the air conditioning. So it's important for the prescriber to explore and get a really good understanding of the patient's visual needs. Prescribing glasses is not only about a clinically significant change in prescription. There's much more to it than that. And it's important to remember that any recommendation that takes place in the consulting room by the prescriber, by the eye care specialist, anything that comes from the eye care specialist in the consulting room carries much more weight than when that recommendation comes from the retail assistant or even a dispensing optician. So in order to ensure that your practice is prosperous and sustainable, and you are there for the long term to provide eye care for your community and your patients, it's important. I mean, I put here that new glasses with optimum lenses are recommended to all patients. I'd probably say most patients. There are some patients who there's no clinically significant change. They're happy with everything. They're happy with their glasses. They don't need some of the things I'm going to explore in just a moment. So, I think a healthy conversion rate, so that's the percentage of patients that you see in community practice versus the percentage of patients, or the number of patients that you see, and then the percentage of those that gets new glasses. Somewhere, I mean, it varies, I know, from practice to practice, depending on the type of people that you see, but somewhere between 60 and 80% of the people who are coming into your practice to have their eyes examined should be having new glasses recommended to them, or possibly contact lenses. It depends. Not all of them, but certainly the majority of them, because probably the majority of them have come to you because they have an eye problem, and they've come to you for your advice. Sometimes I work with practitioners who are lacking in confidence, and what they say to the patient is, well, I found a bit of a change in your prescription. It's up to you whether you want new glasses or not. It's up to the patient whether they want new glasses or not. If I went to my doctor because I've got chest pains, and he said to me, well, it's up to you whether you want to have a cardiogram or not. So, well, why is it up to me? I'm the patient. I'm the one with the chest pains. You're the expert. Do I need a cardiogram or not? What's your advice? Asking the patient to decide on things, all right, maybe they want to decide whether it's a blue frame or a brown frame, fine. But when it comes to something clinical, it's not up to the patient to decide. It's up to the practitioner to give their direction and their advice as to what the patient needs to do in order to have optimum vision. It's not, I don't go to healthcare practitioners for me to be making decisions because I don't have the expertise. So this is what I try and go through, and I still sometimes don't do this as well as I would like. So determining all the visual and cosmetic needs of the patient. I mean, still very occasionally I'll say to people, well, you're not seeing any better with my new prescription. There's a slight change. I don't think you need any new glasses. Well, I want new glasses. I hate this frame. Can I have, I've seen a nice one outside. Is it all right if I have that? Well, of course it's all right. So again, sometimes I still miss out on what the patient needs. And luckily some of them will tell me. Does the patient need a pair of glasses for a specific task? So someone is an avid varifocal wearer. It's quite difficult to read sometimes late at night when it gets a bit darker, trying to get your head in the right position and read a book for an hour with varifocals. Sometimes people might, especially if they're lying in bed and reading in bed, my gosh, how difficult is it to use varifocals when you're lying in bed trying to do a bit of bedtime reading? Maybe a pair of reading glasses, single vision reading glasses would help. Or maybe they'd do a lot of TV watching. Maybe a pair of single vision TV glasses would help, or maybe some office varifocals would help. Does the patient need a second pair? Over the last few days, I've decided that I need a second pair, and you may see why I've decided that, because I fell asleep the other day in my glasses, and I've squashed them. And those of you with keen eyes will see that my glasses are a bit wibbly wobbly, because I don't have equipment here to straighten them. And even if I did, I'd be a bit worried. I should have had a second pair, and I don't. So that's taught me that I need a backup pair of glasses. Or does someone need a pair of glasses for TV and another distance pair to keep in the car for driving? So all of these things can be explored in practice and should be explored in practice, not to drive the practice profits, but to make sure that you've covered the patient visual needs. And by doing that, you will drive the patient profits. But the primary position, the primary view, the primary aim is to help the patient see better under all the circumstances that they need to see better. I never use that phrase, oh, would you like a spare pair? Oh, spare pair. Spare pair means it sits somewhere and it never does anything. That's what spare means to me. It's not used or rarely used, or it's redundant. It just sits. Never use a spare. A spare tire in the car. Yeah, I can just about understand that. Yeah, but not spare glasses. Second pair of glasses that you can use for this. Imagine you're on holiday, you're talking to the patient, and you've got your only pair of reading glasses with you, and they get broken on day one. How are you going to do your reading? Good point, Frank. I will have some second glasses because, I could go and get some glasses off the shelf when I'm abroad, ready readers, but I don't want to use those. I'll get a second pair from you to take on holiday. Thanks for mentioning that. Are the current ones badly fitting? Maybe they need a comfort bridge rather than a pads. Look at the lenses. Are they scratched? Is the anti-glare coating broken up? All of these things need to be looked at as part of the process of recommending new glasses. We've had some sunlight, some good sunny days in the UK. Not now today, but over the last couple of weeks. And I've been asking people when they're out and about in the sun, does the sunlight, does the glare bother them? And some say, yeah, it really bothers me. Have you thought about, we hear people know what a reactor light lens is. They're not so sure about what a photochromic means. So we say, have you thought about a reactor light lens? The ones that get darker when it's bright. So when you go on your walks in the sunny afternoon, it'll be more comfortable for you. And I'm particularly keen on recommending photochromics, reactor lights, to people that have some cataract or age-related macular degeneration, because both of those disease processes have been linked to certain aspects of sunlight exposure. So if they have a bit of cataract or have some age-related macular degeneration, or are simply just bothered by the glare of bright sunlight, I'm talking to them about photochromics. I'm introducing that into the conversation. And some will say, yeah, I am bothered by the glare. Those glasses that get darker outside sound perfect. I'm going to have a good look at those. Bearing in mind that the standard photochromics do not go darker inside the house or inside the car because they need UV to work. And the windows and car windscreens, car windows absorb the UV. But there are photochromics. In this country, they're called photo extras that do work in the house. I can't imagine why you might want to have a photochromic lens work in the house, but they do work in the car as well. But they're more recent, more special photochromics that, again, you can have a chat with people about. And you might be thinking, well, I've only got half an hour for an eye exam, Frank. This is going to take ages. But once you get used to going through this, you can go through this quite quickly, maybe even 3, 4, 5 minutes. And this is important because this is where you can get to show your expertise in your recommendations for what the patient needs to have. I think I've mentioned a lot of this, maybe thinner or lighter lenses, maybe polarized lenses if they're working near water or doing some activities on or near water, maybe some impact resistance, maybe an anti-reflection coating. Oh yes, and not to forget, the prescription may help them see better as well. So we have to bear that in mind as well. So there's a whole raft of these things that we can consider in the consulting room, one-to-one, face-to-face with the patient in that clinical context. I've mentioned some of this already. I think this is a bit repetitive. And remember that, I put there, no single spectacles can fulfill all visual functions. It's maybe sometimes they can, but I think if we explore the person's needs and their everyday life and what they're doing, it will be unlikely that one pair of glasses can fulfill all visual functions. And I think the key to this is that the recommendation from the eye specialist in the consulting room, that's perceived, I believe, as a clinical benefit. It's coming from a clinician. It's about clinical benefit to the patient's visual function. And that's how the patient will perceive that. If those sorts of recommendations are mentioned outside of the consulting room, on the retail, in the retail area, that is, I believe, is more likely to be perceived as a sales pitch. This person's trying to sell me this coating. This person's trying to sell me this reactor light. This person's trying to sell me a varifocal. It's in the consulting room, it's clinical recommendations. Outside, it's a sales pitch. That's my take on this. So this is why it's better for this to come from the prescriber in the consulting room. And just to sort of come to the last sort of few slides now. It takes, I ran my own practice, obviously with a team. It wasn't just me. And it took us a lot of time. We did a bit of marketing. We went and spoke to local groups. We took some time and effort and expense to get people to come into the practice. And then what we did was, when they were in the practice, we looked after them. We spoke to them kindly. We bent over backwards. We got this frame, we got that frame. We let them take some frames home so they could show their family. We got most of them back, not always. We did everything that we could once they were in, because it's so hard to get people to come in. And unfortunately, a lot of practices will spend a lot of time and effort getting people to come in and then not treat them very well when they're in the practice. Once they've got them in, that second bit seems to sometimes fail. Like when my mother went for her hearing aftercare and she was treated quite badly. You get people in And again, another example, I was talking with a patient who said, could I recommend a new optician to her? She's a local neighbour. Well, which optician have you been going to? Oh, so-and-so in the high street. Well, he's a really good optician. Why do you want to change from him? Well, no, he's a good optician, she said, but when I phoned up to make an appointment, the receptionist on the phone was so rude that I thought, well, I don't want to go back there again. So, she'd been there for a long time. She knew he was good, but she'd been spoken to rudely. Now she was ready to go somewhere else. Anyway, so once you've got them to come in, because that's the hard bit, really, I think, to get people to come in, because, people have a lot of choice when it comes to where they get their eye care from. There are practices everywhere competing against each other. When I set my practice up in a small town in the UK, there was a practice just almost next door. There was one across the street and there was one down the street. But we didn't mind that because we knew that we could be better in how we dealt with people and how with our customer service. We knew we could be better than the others in terms of our customer service. And we were, and we grew the practice. And we had a patient database of about 5,000 people by the time we decided to sell the practice. It's those people that come back to your practice because they loved the experience of being there. And again, you don't need to be the cheapest practice. You just need to have the best customer service. People will come back if they enjoy the experience of spending money on their eye care and eye health. It's not about the tech. It's about what happens when they're with you and with your team. And it's important, therefore, that your team and you have the right culture and deliver excellent customer service, because that's the way that you will ensure that your practice remains successful for years to come. Oh yeah, these are some of the books that I've written. They're very good, if I say so myself. I prepare content for this iTools online platform. And again, it's sharing the things that I've learned, sharing things I've learned through my mistakes in practice over 30 years, working in hospital practice, academic practice, retail practice, community practice, low vision practice, binocular. So I've worked in lots of different practices and I've made lots of mistakes and I've learned lots from that. And iTools online platform is a way of sharing what I've learned.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dr. Frank, for, taking us through these very important soft skills, which are really something which comes with experience and practice. But these are some things which definitely plays very important role in building up, right? And
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing those with us. Very simple tips, I would say, and something which we routinely can do without much of equipment, as you started the session. Is something which we can do. It's in the head.
It's all in here. And we just
Right.
need to take a little moment to think and be aware of what we're saying and what we're doing, and a little bit awareness of what's around us.
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
Simple, but it can be difficult.
Yeah. Simple yet effective. Most effective, I would say. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. There has been one question which popped up quite a bit earlier during the chat, and I'm just going to pose that to you. It relates to more of doing with professional fees when you are charging your patients. Quite a bit related to the topic, but I know charging professional fees itself is like a big, huge talk, right? But just to give a gist of it, there could be patients who walk into your practice and you do something repeatedly, like you do a re-refraction, and then, as you said, your example of doing a visual field to analyze what the problem is. How would you tackle on these kind of patients where you do an additional test on their revisit and you have to charge them professional fees for that? Any thoughts on this?
Yeah. So again, in my experience in the UK, it's quite mixed. I think it would be quite in the UK for anyone to be charged for visual fields. That's sort of usually as part of the eye examination fee. People get charged for OCT scans. They'll get charged for funded camera images sometimes. But yeah, I take the point here that in other areas in the world, everything has this sort of supplementary charge, which is fine. I understand that. I have no issue with that. Again, we need to make money to keep the practice going. So in this question seems to be that there's a non-tolerance. Everything has been looked at, nothing can be found, so there's a suggestion, well, we need to do visual fields. And I would frame it like that you're not getting on with your glasses. We have looked at everything that we can look at, and the prescription, the fit, the heights, everything that we can think of so far, we've checked, and it seems to be okay. So there's one last thing that we really should do, and that's a visual fields test. And there is a charge for that. But it might well be that there's some serious eye disease going on, which we didn't feel we needed to do a visual fields at the first examination. But the fact that you're not getting on with your glasses, and we've checked everything, that leads us to decide that the visual fields is very important, and this is the fee. It's a difficult area, but again, if the patient isn't happy to have that done, then if there is, you may want to refer the patient to another specialist to have further investigation. Again, I know there might be a charge in that for them to go and see the specialist, but I think it's better to try and handle it in practice and say, we're trying our best, we've done everything, we haven't found a solution. This is the next step, visual fields, and this is the fee.
Right. Yeah. And I think it directly relates to the first two things where you talked about, a patient must be aware of what's going on. So being there for the patient, explaining to them why the importance of the test and why are we doing this is really important, right?
Yeah. So during the history and symptoms, you listen to them, that they like you, that you're a professional. They can see that you're a professional. They can see that you're trying your best. And again, when they can see those things, it's almost like they're buying into you. They're buying into you as a person, as a believable practitioner. And then they're more likely to agree to the visual fields and pay that fee if they bought into you as it were.
Right. Yeah. And there's one question again which comes on the chat. It tells us about the asking about more of the progressive lens wearer complaints. So if you could just go through or give us some quick tips on if there is a patient who have a non-compliance, again, a non-tolerance, what you discuss, wearing progressive lenses, how would be your sort of approach on, going about counseling or talking to the patient? Any particular tips you would want to share with us when it comes to a non-tolerant progressive spectacle wearer? Sure.
Well, my tip, I start when they're having their the varifocals. So before there's been a non-toll, so the lenses I work with, the varifocals, we call it platinum, gold, silver, and the platinum has the widest corridor and the widest reading area. The gold has slightly narrower corridor and reading area, and the silver has the narrowest corridor, and so on. So there are three types, and I show them diagrams of the corridors and the reading area. And I say, the platinum one is the one with the widest corridor, widest reading, makes for the most comfortable reading. But of course, that's the most expensive one. Then we have the gold one, slightly narrowed. Then we have the silver one. Most people will go for the gold one, because most people, if you offer them a choice of three, will go for the middle. Some say, I want the best possible varifocal lens. I'm going to go for the platinum one with the widest. So if, let's say, someone that's gone for silver or gone for gold comes back and says, I'm struggling to read, then I'll say, well, it may well be that for your tasks at work or at home, you might need a wider read. Remember, we spoke about a wider reading area, so we can have a discussion about that. but also again, the fitting heights. So not just the corridor width and reading area size, but the fitting heights, in my experience, are particularly important. And I've made errors in, when you dot up the center of the pupil to get the fitting heights for a varifocal. Again, you have to be careful that when you're doing that, if they have their chin slightly down, you're going to get the fitting heights wrong. If they have their chin up, there's a real art to getting the fitting heights spot on for varifocals. So I'll be talking about the different reading portions. I'll be making sure that chin not too high, chin not too low, or not to the side when I'm doing the dots. Again, that's very important that the person that does the fitting dots is experienced and knows what to do. And as I say, sometimes I've got that wrong. Is the frame too shallow? Maybe there just isn't enough frame. Maybe you need a bit of a deeper frame. Maybe the frame is too big. So again, they're struggling to get their eyes low enough to get the reading. So maybe your plus 350 ad is too much for them. So the working distance is too close. Maybe you need to drop the ad a little bit. So these are all the things I'm thinking about. So some pre-discussion before they choose, and then if they are having problems, then and double checking the dots. And if they are, in my experience, it's usually the fitting height is wrong in varifocals. That's my experience of when people come back. Making sure that the working distance isn't too short because you've overdone the ad. Again, making sure the frame, because my glasses are a bit wonky, so if the varifocals are a bit wonky, then that could spoil the way they work as well. So I think that's all I can think of with varifocals. That's all I can think of right now.
Yeah, right. I think very important points on firstly is knowing the needs of the patient. And as you said, the category of what are the advantages and the benefits you get from each category, discussing and relating it with the patient's need is really important to probably avoid the future problems, right? So your initial thing should be very well balanced, and then it will help us to minimize all of that future disputes or patients not happy wearing their glasses or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing to bear in mind is, again, when you're just starting the dispensing, if they've got +6 in each eye, you don't want a frame that's this big. Or, if they've got -6 in each eye, you probably don't want to use a metal frame because you'll see the edge of the lens. You might want to use thinner and lighter lenses and maybe use a plastic frame. So there are those. I know that goes beyond varifocals, but there are those things to consider as well: size of frame, prescription powers, plastic frames, metal frames, those sorts of things.
Awesome, great. So I think with that, thank you so much, Dr. Frank. We have taken all questions and good discussion. Really very important. As one of the attendees mentioned, that this is something which is all practitioners must know about, and it's something which not there in the books. You will learn it by how you go into the practice and deal with patients. So the really important aspect to be explored. So thank you so much for sharing that techniques and expertise with us today.
You're very welcome. Yeah. Thank you everyone for listening.
Most welcome. We do have a session planned at the end of the month. Since now we are moving on to 2 sessions a month, the next session is going to be on the 3rd week of April. So take care, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Frank, once again.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. It's been delightful. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.